Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. George McCrees, a naturopathic doctor, speaker, and entrepreneur based out of Toronto, Ontario. Today, I have an amazing, inspirational guest, Peter Estévez, who's based in Texas. Peter is an author, he's a speaker, he's an entrepreneur, he's a philanthropist, and he's an advocate for recovery and mental health. So we're going to probably have an amazing conversation today. So thank you so much, Peter, for joining us, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you, Dr. McCrees. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Peter, let's kick things off right away. I want you to start by sharing your story. I know that you came to Texas at a very young age with pretty much nothing. You got a tremendous amount of financial success, I think around 23, 24 years old, but things started to change around that time. And I'm going to let you elaborate on that specifically. But Peter, the floor is yours. Please share your story.
Oh, thank you so much. I migrated to the United States at the age of 10 years old with my 12 siblings, 6 brothers and 6 sisters, plus mom and dad. There was 15 of us. And we migrated to San Antonio, Texas, which is south of the border. And north of the border, rather. And we lived in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath frame home, less than 900 square feet. Mother was 15 and dad was 18 when they got married. They were literally children raising children. Father had a 3rd grade education and mother had a 6th grade education. Statistically, George, I was destined to repeat those cycles of dysfunction, poverty, and illiteracy. It was very, very difficult times. We migrated to Texas in a time where there was a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of backslash towards immigrants back in that time. And San Antonio, ironically enough, was a military town. There was about 400,000 people. There was 9 military bases, and it was a very patriotic town. It was a town which was very American. And what I learned was that people like me were not welcome. And we were not welcome because we were seen as people that would come here and take the jobs and basically we were seen as menace to society, for lack of a better word. And, that really, as a young boy, that really fueled me because I didn't like the way I was felt and I was treated. And I didn't like to see the discrimination that my parents went through. I saw my father, who was basically literate, being mistreated by his bosses, and treated differently because of his lack. Although my dad was a very, very intelligent man in the sense that he was very street smart and he was a hard worker and he was definitely an intelligent man. He didn't have a formal education. And that was definitely a handicap for him. Well, it's a handicap for all of us when we don't have a formal education. But I didn't realize the impact until later on in life. However, ironically enough, all those difficult times fueled me and drove me. And I realized that where I was not who I was. It was just where I was at that particular moment in time. Unfortunately, everything looked blinked around me. Everything was dark. Everything was gray. There was no people that I inspired to be like. Obviously we become the total. There's a quote, a well-known quote said that we become the total sum of the 5 people that we surround ourselves by. Right? Well, I was a total sum of my environment. I was the total sum of my community. I was a total sum of what was in my household. And my parents, my brothers, my siblings. And I realized that if I wanted to change, I needed to change. And this was something that came on very, very, as a very young boy. It was something that I knew that there was something I needed to do. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that I needed to do something different in order to be able to escape the poverty, the dysfunction, the illiteracy, and all those things that were around me. And, I'm talking pre-social media, pre-internet. I'm talking a lot of the stuff that we're used to today. The world has really transformed in the last 20 years. And the reality is that there was no mentors. There was no YouTube. There was no social media where you could interact with people like you and I interacted and connected through social media. And there was no ebooks or podcasts that we could listen to. It was somewhat of do it yourself and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I think my father's determination and drive, fueled me. The poverty, the despair, the sleeping in the bedroom in sleeping bags because we lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath frame home. So the boys would sleep in the living room in sleeping bags. The girls had one room with bunk beds, and then mom and dad had their own room to have their own privacy. Mm-hmm. So all those things was a great fuel for me to achieve, to do better, to be better, and to become better. And I was very fortunate that I found my niche very early in life in the real estate business. So by the age of 24, I had entered the real estate business and I achieved massive financial success. I figured out a formula to be able to develop, I did what today is commonly known as a fix and flips. But I did those by the hundreds, an average of 200 to 300 fix and flips per year. Eventually became a real estate developer, developing subdivisions and shopping centers and other commercial and industrial parkways. Mm-hmm. And that really catapulted me into achieving great wealth at a very young age. However, you can take the kid out of the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the kid. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that social conditioning that I had adopted from a young boy, I carry on with me. The fear, the insecurity, the I'm not enough, the imposter syndrome. So I found myself with great, tremendous wealth, but I felt awkward in many spaces. I felt I didn't belong there. I felt like an imposter. I felt like at any given moment, somebody was going to figure out that I was not as smart as they thought I was. And I found a way of calming that through alcohol, mm-hmm. women, through cars, mm-hmm. through a new house, a new suit, a new pair of shoes, a new tie, anything that would numb the way I felt, anything that would change the way that I felt. So I went on to creating great wealth and having an incredible life from the exterior, but the inside of me was dying. The inside of me, I was trying to kill it, because I had not gone back and rescued that 10-year-old boy that had migrated to the United States. He was the one that showed up to all the events. He was the one that showed up to the galas. He was the one that showed up to the fundraisers. He was the one that showed up to the conferences. And the minute he felt out of place, he would sabotage everything that the exterior of me was building. Mm-hmm. And it was a very haunting period of time in my life until it changed.
Wow, a couple of things to unpack there. It's amazing that you were able to find such financial success, right? And from the external observer, as a male, you had it all, right? You had the cars, the women, the financial success, the fame. And it jogs my memory, of a book that I read, which I think is you've had him on your show, Robin Sharma.
Sure, great friend. Yes,
such an amazing book, and I think it sheds a lot of light onto a lot of the times we place a lot of value on these external material items, right? And a lot of the times we might perhaps find pleasure in the interim, but it's not going to lead to sustained happiness. Right. And I think kind of your story sheds light on that. But I do want to ask you a question, right? So you said, it was haunting. This 10-year-old boy was surfacing, which I'm sure there was a lot of things that went on in childhood that were probably unresolved. What led you to ultimately, or what sparked you to have that change, having accumulated all this success, but yet you were deeply withdrawn on the inside and you just weren't fulfilled? For you, was it an aha moment? Was it a mentor? What in your life caused you to just turn 360?
Excuse me, George. I think life has a way of giving us a series of clues. I call them the whispers of God. that tap in the shoulders. And I think that I had even though I was going through this process in life where there was a lot of self-sabotaging, where there was a lot of pain, where there was a lot of unresolved issues, along the way, I always met people, whether it was a relationship that I got involved in, whether it was a woman I married, whether it was a business partner, that taught me a lesson, okay? And that almost kind of put a little bug in my ear about my behaviors, about my actions. So I think every individual that I had met along my life has had some type of impact in my life, has taught me a lesson that maybe I didn't get the full awareness at the beginning, but it was an accumulation of incidents that kind of woke me up and maybe changed me a little bit. But really the turning point for me was obviously masking the pain, masking the wounds, masking the fear, the insecurity, the imposter syndrome, the I'm not enough, drove me to consume alcohol in great amounts, okay, to abuse alcohol. And it became a serious issue to the point that when my son's mother was pregnant, and I did it again, one of those incidents that, went to a party, misbehaved, I was inappropriate with the neighbor's wife, whatever it was, she gave me an ultimatum. And at the time, my son was 6 months old. And it was the very first time in my life that I had been facing certain circumstances because my wife didn't need me. She had come from a family that was stable, completely opposite than me. She didn't have, 12 siblings. She had one sister. Her father was an engineer, was a professional. My father was a blue collar worker. She lived in a normal, upscale, upper middle class home. She was definitely, I definitely marry up, right? And she didn't need me by all practical purposes. And she gave me an ultimatum, and her ultimatum was, you either change or I'm leaving with our son. You're not going to see him again. That was really kind of a serious awakening for me. It was the very first time I was already in therapy. I had already destroyed many relationships. I had already sabotaged many friendships. I had really screwed up plenty of times. Okay. So this particular bug in my ear about you either change or I'm leaving with my son, was really a rude awakening. So I'm on my therapist, I met with him, and he told me something that no one had ever told me, but everybody knew about me. And that is that I had an acute problem with alcohol. Okay. I was severely abusing alcohol to the point that it was numbing the way I felt, numbing the way I behaved, numbing everything about me. And Dr. Worsham at the time, he said, Peter, you're an incredibly smart man. You have accomplished great things, but you have one of the most acute alcohol problems I ever seen in my life. And unfortunately, there's not a cure for that. There's only one solution to that we know of today, and that is through the process of Alcoholics Anonymous. And unless you do something about it, you're either going to die, you're going to end up in an institution, or you're going to end up in jail. Those are the three choices. So the way you're going, those are your choices. And I remember this was a Monday morning, and I asked him, just like a little boy, that little boy came back at me and said, what do I do, doctor? I really don't want to feel the way I feel. I really don't want to lose my son. I don't want to lose my wife. I don't want to feel this pain. And he said, I suggest that you go to a meeting. And that was my very first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. And from the doctor's office, from my psychiatrist's office, I went straight to an AA meeting. And I've been sober 24 years today. Okay. And I realized the amount of mental illness that I had experienced throughout my life. And I realized at that particular moment that my issues was not alcohol. My issues was not money. My issues was not women. My issues was a series of unresolved issues that had been accumulated over the years. And that 10-year-old broken little boy that migrated to the United States, that was abused, lived in poverty, no matter what he accomplished, he was not good enough. And until I tended to that little boy, okay, until I tended to him, or unless I tended to him, I was going to continue to sabotage everything that I accomplished and that I did. And that was the very first time that I realized that I really needed to do something. Okay. So I started my process of recovery. obviously sobriety came first and then recovery. You know, and what I realized through that process, George, is that you know, sobriety just putting the plug in the jug is stopping the drinking. But recovery is a transformation of the mind, soul, body, and spirit. Recovery is truly being born again. It is becoming who you were intended to be. And I felt that from the moment that I walked into that room. And although I was worried about who was there, who was going to watch me, and who was, if I knew anybody in that room, I also knew that I was at the right place at that particular time in life. So to your point and to your questions, to answer your question, it was each person that I had met through my life had pushed me a little bit to seek help. You know, the first person in my life got me to a psychiatrist. My ex-wife got me to AA indirectly or directly, right? But along came, you know, more problems. You know, I was sober, exited my company in 99, moved to the Woodlands. I had arrived. I had arrived in the sense that, you know, I had the beautiful blonde wife, you know, the 2.5 children, the cat and the dog and the Mercedes and the SUV in the driveway. But I still continue feeling the same way I was feeling before. That taunting kept coming back to me. But I was no longer drinking, okay? A lot of stuff kept coming into the surface. A lot of stuff that had happened through my life kept coming back to me. And I kept manifesting behaviors and modeling behaviors that I had seen throughout my life, just in a different way with a different set of values. And I gave it a different spin, right? But the reality is that the behaviors were the same behaviors. Maybe I was not a pedophile, but I did not know how to treat women properly, okay? Maybe I was not a cokehead, but I was an alcoholic. So it was just a different type of behaviors, but the reality is that the problems were there and they existed, okay? So finally in 2008, things came to a head. You know, the real estate market was at its worst, okay? My mother passed away. My ex-wife, within a couple of weeks after mother passing away, asked me for a divorce. And 6 months later, my father passes away. So I go through a period in my life where a lot of everything I knew, my life, my identity, who I was, where I came from, including my financial identity, were being ripped away from me. And I was faced with myself for the very first time, or the second time if we include the time I went to AA. But really this time it was completely different because I was sober. I couldn't blame it on alcohol. You know, I couldn't blame it on anything. It was me. It was my own doing. So here I am. I'm in a situation where mother passes away. I'm facing one of the worst real estate crises that we had seen through our generation, right? In our lifetime. My wife asked me for a divorce, okay? And my father passes away. And I am granted custody of my son, who at the time was 6 years old, okay? And Alec was 6 years old, and his life had been completely ripped away because he went from knowing this normal white picket fence, American Pie life to his mother living with another man, his father trying to figure out what he was going to do. Here we are in a big old house by ourselves, and I'm trying to fix myself, but I'm neglecting my son at the same time. And I never forget this. You know, there was a time where I'm at a meeting at Alcoholics Anonymous, and I looked at my phone. I had multiple missed messages from my son. So I stepped out of the meeting and called him back. And first thing he tells me is, I hate you, I hate my mother, and I hate my life, and I want to die. So you're talking about a rude awakening, right? You're talking about your 6-year-old kid telling you that. Drive home, pick him up, spend the next 4 or 5 hours with him, driving around, talking, just trying to get him to listen to me and to feel different about himself. And I felt like we had turned it around. And at the end of the day, I told him when we were driving back home, I said, I'm going to make you 2 promises. And first is that you are never going to feel the way you feel like that. I'm never going to allow that to happen. And two is that I am going to be the best father possible, that you will never feel a gap between the fact that your mom and I are not together anymore. But I'm going to do my darnest to be able that I'm the best father possible. And my son goes to bed and I go to my room, and then I'm laying in bed looking at the ceiling, staring at the ceiling, thinking to myself, I just made two promises to my son that I don't know how I'm going to keep. And obviously I didn't have a great track record. So I needed to figure out how I was going to keep those two promises to my son. So I literally got out of bed, went to my office, and I Googled, how do I become a better person? And what popped up at that time was the platform Mind Valley. I don't know if you're familiar with Mind Valley, but Mind Valley is a personal development platform owned and operated by Vishen Lakhiani and his wife, ex-wife now, Christina. And I became a student of the personal development space. I became a learner. And I realized as I started taking course after course after course, class after class, listening to audio after audio, listening to podcasts, I became a voracious learner. I realized how little I knew. And I realized also how much emotional intelligence I was lacking, how illiterate I was when it came to emotional intelligence. And I realized that maybe my son was not living in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 900 square feet frame home, but my thinking was that of that poor kid back then. And I was really exposing my son to the same type of behaviors, just at a different scale with a different set of values. And the reality is that I learned at that particular moment, the money had not done anything for me. It had just driven me to a different house, to a different car, to a different lifestyle, but I was still the same broken person that had a lot of issues. And I made a commitment. I made a commitment to transform that individual into someone else, someone that it didn't matter what my ex-wife thought. It didn't matter what my son thought. It mattered what I thought. Someone I was proud of, someone that I could look myself in the mirror and not be ashamed of who I was or where I came from. And I really dove into the personal development space, and I developed a theory, which is the 5 pillars. And I truly believe, George, that every single one of them, when we operate from the 5-pillar system, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the financial, we are able to exit the state of survival, the state of fear, the state of insecurity, the state of I'm not enough, the imposter syndrome. We're able to exit all those states, and we become present here in the now. Okay, and we operate from a state of flow, and we're able to see our life with clarity and possibilities. And when we do that, it doesn't matter what happens to us; it happens for us. Okay, and now we're able to deal with circumstances not in a self-destructive way, not in a manipulative way, not in an advantageous way, but in a way that we have clarity and possibilities to be able to deal with challenges and adversities that every single individual in this world faces with. It's just how we handle those. And that has propelled me to become a completely different person than the person that I was when I was born. And it's interesting enough because, my son today is 23 years old. He graduated from college. He's an incredible individual. He's an incredible man. He's an incredible human being. And the reality is that what I did instead of becoming my father, okay, and wanting to bring my son to my generation, I stepped down into his generation. I stepped down into who he is and who he is becoming, and try to understand his world instead of trying to get him to understand mine. And that really did a 180 for me, for the way I think, the way I believe, the way I behave, and the way I act. Because he brought me to be able to understand the world for what it is and not for what I want it to be.
Beautifully said. Throughout that time, I definitely got goosebumps a couple of times. And you've talked a lot about some amazing, profound things that I think many viewers can take into their own life, right? And so I would love to hear some thoughts and shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about men's mental health, which is an area of work that I'm very passionate about. And I think it's highly stigmatized. You spoke about this notion of emotional intelligence, and from my experience working with patients and just, even being engaged with the men that are in my life, time and time again, I find myself around a lot of men who perhaps aren't emotionally intelligent. Maybe they haven't gone down their journey of healing. Maybe they're just not aware. There's so many different variables that are at play here. But I would love to ask you and hear your thoughts in terms of men's mental health. We often, as a society, view this as a weakness. Men to talk about their emotions, be vulnerable, be expressive with all these different things that we're experiencing. And they often have the proclivity not to seek help or not to talk to people. Why do you think that this is so apparent in today's society as it pertains to men's mental health specifically?
Well, I do believe that it's changing, and I do believe that we have become a little bit more vocal about our feelings, about our emotions, right? Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that I come from a generation of parents that come from the silent generation. Okay, parents that were not expressive, parents that never told you I love you. Okay, I had a father that I think he told me in his deathbed that he loved me for the very first time. Okay. And, and for a long time, here I am, a grown man, wanting my father to tell me he loves me. A grown man, where I see the relationship with my son, and there's not a day that goes by, or morning or afternoon or in fountain, that we don't tell each other we love each other. And it's natural. It's not, it's not weird. It's not awkward. It's not unmanly. It's not anything. It's just normal. Okay. But I think that from the perspective of many generations, you got to remember something. A lot of what we experience as human beings is baggage that we're carrying on for multi-generations, is baggage that we're carrying on from, 200-300 years of junk that has been passed over and passed over and passed over and passed over and passed over. Okay. From the silent generation to not hugging your kids or telling them how well they're doing or how proud you are of them, to whatever it may be, or aren't you a man to do this, or men don't cry, or a lot of that BS that has been programmed into us throughout multi-generations is junk that we got to work through. But the reality is, George, that somebody has to step up. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to be the one in the family that says, hey, this is not acceptable. I come from a family of 13. There's a lot of dysfunction with 15 people living in very close quarters from illiterate parents, okay, that probably went through their own personal abuses and incest and whatever you want to call it. I experienced all of that. But I also had to be the one that says, this cycle is not continuing in my household. This cycle is broken here. Probably you asked me who were my teachers, my mentors, the person that impacted me the most. Okay. Obviously, today I realize that almost every person I had met throughout my life has made somewhat of a significant impact in my life. But probably my greatest teacher was my son. And he's been my son in the sense that he's awoken me. He's awoken a different individual in me that I had never had the capacity to see before. And he awoken me because I realized that circumstance, that 6-year-old that called me and told me he hated his life was the same 10-year-old that migrated to the United States at the age of 10 years old, okay? Feeling broken, feeling unwanted, with fear and insecurity and imposter syndrome. It was the same kid, okay? And it was the same kid because I had projected all those insecurities into him. Okay. Now it was my job and my responsibility to assure that I dismantled them. Okay. So if we don't want those things to continue on in our family, somebody has to step up and say, hey, it's not acceptable. Create boundaries. Okay. I truly believe, George, that when you take care of yourself, which is not selfish, okay, mm-hmm. you are able to give more to others. You are able to see the abundance that is readily available in this world. But when you're not taking care of yourself, you leave from a scarcity mindset. You leave from a state of survival, and you're not willing or able to give anything to anyone, okay? And you're really almost counterproductive in a sense. So when we start taking care of ourselves, there's a certain sense of self-awareness, okay, and conscious awareness that intermeet Okay. And it gives you the ability to see the world from a completely different perspective. So I had to be able to believe that, well, I come from a generation that maybe is becoming obsolete. Okay. I've been sideswiped by technology, by social media, by the internet, okay, by so many different things. I either become part of, okay, or I become a part from. And I chose to become part of and understand the world for what it was becoming and not try to impose my belief systems into the world. And what happens is that a lot of times when we allow people to treat us a certain way, to see us a certain way, it becomes a norm. And we are the ones that take the blunt of the consequences and the blunt of the pain, and where that fear, that insecurity, the I'm not enough, the mental illness, okay, the inability to be able to process our emotions and our feelings and to share them and to tell people freely, hey, this is not acceptable. We rob ourselves of those opportunities. So I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did.
No, you absolutely did. And in terms of our stories, I know there's definitely many differences, but for sure there's some similarities in our brief discussion thus far. When you spoke about your father not telling him that he loves you, I mean that resonated so deeply with me, because as a child and a teenager and an adolescent, I didn't even think about these things. It was only until later on in my adulthood where I became cognizant of this, and I thought, wow, my father has never told me he loves me. And to this day, if I'm not mistaken, if he has, it might have been once or twice. And that was a big part of my healing, because all I wanted was to hear my father say, I love you and I'm proud of you. And he's from the generation where they are silent. So perhaps I might not even hear that, to be honest. And that was huge for me, because I had to be okay with knowing that my father won't be able to verbalize that. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't love me. It just means he's not showing it, or he's showing it in other ways. And that for me was a huge part in my healing journey. And it was similar to what you said. So I think you answered my question quite deeply. I do want to say now, though, ask you another question, because I can see in your voice and just you're so passionate about mental health, and it speaks volumes, I think, to my work. And there's a PhD author by the name of Arthur Brooks, and he speaks of macronutrients. We have the nutritional macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, right? Conversely, he alludes to macronutrients of happiness. That is enjoyment, sacrifice, and purpose. So I would love to hear your thoughts on each one of those domains and what they mean to you, and perhaps shed some light onto how you can inspire others. So let's start with enjoyment. What does enjoyment mean to you?
Wow. Well, enjoyment to me today means something completely different than what it used to mean, right? I'm never going to give you a yes or no answer. I'm always going to elaborate a little bit. That's just my style. Mm-hmm. Okay. But enjoyment to me means being happy with yourself and the things that are going on around you, regardless of. Okay? So what do I mean by that? I truly believe everything that I was chasing, George, that high to change the way that I feel, the wanting to be wanted, I went from relationship to relationship because I felt like, well, this other relationship knows too much about me, and now they know I'm dirty, and they no longer like me. That was my mental health speaking to me, right? So it was easier to get rid of somebody, move on to the next person, and the next relationship, and the next relationship. Okay, and really, what I was looking for, that attention that is brand new in a relationship, where somebody tells you everything's beautiful and nice and sweet, and they tell you, oh, I love you too, and I love you, oh, I love you, and I love you too. So I was looking for the dopamine rushes. I was looking for the serotonin rushes. I was looking for the hormone rushes. I was looking for all of that, and I did not know that I could produce that myself. I did not know that I could go out for a run and enter this state that I was looking for. I did not know that I could go to the gym and work out and enter this state I was looking for. I did not know that I could get up early and journal and write a gratitude list and find all of that. Okay. So, what I have learned, and it's as part of my 5 pillars, is that if you take an action that becomes a habit, and a habit that becomes a ritual, and a ritual that becomes a lifestyle, okay, you are able to transform all of you, not part of you, but all of you, okay? So today, I live a life that I'm incredibly happy for. Incredibly happy for. And I haven't drank alcohol in 24 years, so I don't need to get high because I'm naturally high, okay? So I get a lot of pleasure today out of serving people. That's why we started our platform, Latin Talks, okay? Which is a series of talks and conversations where local Latin leaders share the answers and solutions to challenges and adversities they once faced. Why did I do that? Because I am trying to recreate the things I needed as a young boy, okay? And I'm trying to recreate that for other people because I know there's a lot of little Peters out there in the world looking for the same thing I was looking for. I am not that unique. I could not possibly be the only one. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that gives me a tremendous amount of pleasure today. Mm-hmm. Being able to figure out a way how I can serve others and make an impact, whether it's through a post on social media, a conversation with somebody, changing the life of somebody, or through a TED Talk, or just having a conversation with my son.
Well said. And I think I just want to touch up on one thing that I think stood out when you spoke about, moving from relationship to relationship and getting these, these dopamine and serotonin hits. I think today, especially in our society, people are so focused on the novelty of new relationships instead of, cultivating and nurturing the existing relationships that they have and finding true meaning and love within those relationships, right? We live in a society today, especially with social media and Instagram, where it's like everything is just at our fingertips. We just want constant pleasure, quick dopamine hits, and we're not taking the time to take a step back and say, and to reflect and to have, deep level of introspection. What is it that I truly want? Because I think if we keep going down that path, although we might think it's happiness, it leads to severe mental disturbances down the road, right? And you're not gonna live a fulfilled life in that domain. So I just want to shed light on that. Number 2, I said it was sacrifice, but it's actually satisfaction. I had to correct myself. So the second macronutrient is satisfaction. Peter, what does satisfaction mean for you?
Wow. Living in a state of gratitude. Living in a state of gratitude because and that's not complacency, okay? That doesn't mean that I don't have goals. I'm working on my 3rd company, right? And I envision a major X in the next, 24 to 36 months, right? But that's not complacency. Satisfaction to me is being able to live in a state of gratitude. And I really do live in a state of gratitude where I'm very happy where I'm at in my life. And I don't need more than that, but I don't need less. Okay. And a lot of that comes from one, realizing that I live in an abundant world. Okay. And that there's plenty for everybody. Mm-hmm. Okay. And 2, living in an abundant world that there's a lot of people that cannot see it for what it is, that they don't see the abundance that it is. Okay. But being able to bring awareness to them in a way that they can see that abundance. Okay. And absorb some of that for themselves. And a lot of that has to do with being able to sometimes just acknowledge people. Just acknowledging that they're there, that they exist. Mm-hmm. And And I think today, especially today, even though you said we think we're so interconnected, okay, we think we're interconnected because we're watching people or talking or connecting with people on social media, but that's not connectivity. That is not connectivity. That's not human connection. That is not one-to-one. Feel your skin, feel a hug, feel a handshake, ask me how I am and really caring, right? We're sending little micro messages on social media but we're not truly connecting. So I think for me, a tremendous amount of satisfaction comes from cultivating incredible relationships that I am there for them and they're there for me, and being able to make a friend out of a stranger.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And just before I move on to the last one, with this, the social media and all this Instagram again and Facebook, although of course there's benefits and it allowed us to be connected and to even do an amazing podcast such as this, I think when we break it down, it has at the end of the day disconnected us more than ever. Of course, it's amazing to have the capability of connecting remotely and meeting people that you wouldn't have otherwise. But that it also is creating this disillusion reality for many where they're just completely disconnected from people, where just it's very simple. Walk outside nowadays, take a look around and see how many people are face down in a screen, walking on a subway.
Zombies.
Right? It's just we're walking zombies.
Mm-hmm.
And number 3, it is purpose. Peter, how important is it finding your true sense of purpose in this life?
It's everything. It's absolutely everything. But I want to touch on something that you said a minute ago.
Of course.
I want to talk about social media, technology, and AI, and the importance of them. Okay, we cannot run away from them. They're here to stay. Okay, but we have to look at those as tools and resources in order for us to improve our productivity and our creativity. Okay, there are not who we are. They're an extension of who we are and what we do. And if we look at those that way, we don't fall into that vacuum of loneliness and FOMO and believing that a conversation or a message with somebody or a like or a comment stimulates you enough to think that that's your life, right? Is to be able, you and I have taken social media to a level of where we have connected, okay? And one day I look forward to coming down to Canada and visiting with you and having lunch or dinner or whatever, and us becoming long-lasting friends. I have many of my Robin Sharma. I met Robin, the author that you spoke about earlier, that wrote the book The Monk That Sold His Ferrari. Robin and I met in social media. Eventually, we met in LA in person, and we message each other every so often, and we talk to each other and we communicate. He's been on my podcast. We talked about doing collaborations. So if you know how to use these tools and resources for your benefit, they're not only for your benefit, but they're for the benefit of the world. Okay. This information that you're going to be disseminating through the podcast is going to bring value to somebody. All we need to do is impact one person at a time. But purpose, you cannot live life without a purpose. If and my purpose has been different throughout life. It's changed. Okay. As a young boy, my purpose was to get out of poverty. Okay. At some point, my purpose was to get out of the mental state that I was in, to have the clarity and the ability to become a better father and a better member of my community and a better member of society. Okay. And today my purpose is how do I impact more people? How do I make a difference? How do I use my platform and my message in order to be able to live the world better than I found it? Because I do believe that we have not only a generational opportunity, but we have a generational obligation to assure that we live this space, we live this universe better than we found it. and that we don't go to our grave with regrets or blaming it on somebody else. And the only reason we would do that is if we have not taken the time to work on ourselves. So my purpose for a long time, and it still is, to continue to assure that I am better, that I do better, and that I become better. But for the better of being able to contribute to this universe in a better way.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. And anytime I hear about change and being better, people often think when it comes to change is, I can't change the world for the better. Well, shift that perspective. You don't have to change the world for everyone, just change one person's world. And if everyone, has that perspective, that invariably is going to have a ripple effect throughout the entire world. I just want to, shift gears a little bit, Peter, and be respectful of your time. You have a book coming out, or it is out?
I do. Okay. I actually was supposed to be out this year.
Okay.
And obviously, project after project keeps delaying it, but we are in final edits.
Okay.
And we will be releasing it at Las Vegas. We have a Vegas conference at HEI in September of this year, 2024.
So, if you could just quickly, perhaps, tell our listeners, if the listeners pick up this book and they read it, what can they anticipate, perhaps, in a nutshell, what they can learn from it, and or what inspired you to write this?
Well, my journey inspired me to write the book. Okay. And it is called From Lies to Riches, 13 Steps to a Healthy Life. And in recovery, there's 12 steps. There's 12 steps in the program of recovery. What I've done collectively with this book is each chapter of the book, up to the 12th step, is the step in recovery. And what was it that happened in my life during that time period? And how was I able to utilize that step to change my life for the positive? Okay. And then the 13th step, which is a 13th chapter, is I incorporated the 5 pillars. Okay. How was it, because there was a time that I got to recovery and I was in Alcoholics Anonymous at some point. And I felt, is this all there is to life? I couldn't understand. First of all, logically, I understood why it was anonymous, but illogically, I didn't understand why it was anonymous because there was a part of me that says, if this is so freaking great, why aren't we out there screaming to the world and telling them about it, right? So that illogical part of me could not, I understood why back in 1939, where society was shun mental health and drunks, I understood why you would want to keep that anonymous. But if, to your point of making sure that mental health, especially among men, is not something that we should be ashamed of. Whereas there are things like this that need to change. There's things like Alcoholics Anonymous or even religious beliefs and certain other beliefs that we need to change or modify in order to make sure that they become relevant to today's culture, to today's world, right? And this is one of those things that I believe that, if everybody knew I was a drunk, why would I not want everyone to know that I'm sober now? Mm-hmm. Why do I have to keep it anonymous, right? So I forgot where I was going with that with that message, but my point being is that in there's things that we need to change. There's things that we need to change in order to make it relevant to today's world, because the world has changed. The way we think has changed. The way we perceive information has changed. The way we receive information has changed. That means that we need to change.
Absolutely. And Peter, one final question, perhaps so our viewers can perhaps have a summary takeaway from this great conversation that we've had thus far. If I come up to you and I've never met you, I said, Peter, I'm struggling. I want you to tell me 3 things that will hopefully propel me to live a life, enriched with fulfillment, joy, and all these things that people speak about. What would you tell that person? 3 things.
Wow. I'm not sure I could come up with 3 things, George, because my approach, if you were to come to me and talk to me as you said it, I would probably try to get you to talk as much as you could. Okay. And I would probably keep that conversation going as long as I could, because I think every answer that we need for ourselves is within ourselves. Okay. I can tell you that there was a lot of people that knew I was a drunk and tried to tell me I was a drunk, but I wouldn't listen because I wasn't ready to listen. But I can also tell you there was a lot of people that was never willing to listen to me, period. That they just discarded me, okay? People that I really wanted their attention from. So I think that if you and I were to talk and you were to tell me that what are the 3 things that could change my life, I would let you talk and talk and talk and talk until you hear that message for yourself. And probably what I would tell you is that what has worked for me sometime along the way, I would tell you is that I truly believe, at the risk of sounding redundant, that I truly believe that as human beings, we operate from 5 pillars: the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the financial. And that when we tend to those 5 pillars through a series of exercises on a daily basis, we are able to find the dopamine rushes, the serotonin rushes, the hormonal rushes that we need in order to live in an altered state or a state of flow. And that when we are at that state, 99% of our problems disappear. And it's very simple because we're able to see our life with clarity and possibilities. We become present and available. We become here in the now. And it really is so freaking easy to know that 99% of our answers lie in that belief, at least for me, that is so easy to dismiss. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, and I couldn't agree more. And just to wrap up here, quickly talking amongst friends and family, I often hear them say, "Oh, it's very difficult if people or friends or family are spewing their difficulties, their stress, or their emotional problems." And I always say, sometimes people just want to be heard. So all you have to do is listen, right? It doesn't have to be advice, or just listen, and that in itself is extremely powerful and therapeutic. And I think you pretty much summarized that with the last question.
Most people are not looking for an answer. They just want to be heard.
Exactly.
Acknowledge.
Peter, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You truly are an inspiration. You're admirable, and I was very honored to be able to connect and have this chat with you. And I really look forward to meeting you one day, whether I'm in Texas, you're in Toronto. I truly believe our paths are going to cross at one point or another.
I do too, George. Thank you so much for the invitation. I truly enjoyed it.
Take care, Peter.
Take care.